Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Love-Zaranka. I am the Program Director for Lactation Education Resources. Welcome today.
Hello, I am Sekeita Lewis-Johnson. I am the Accredited Provider Program Director here at LER, as well as one of the instructors.
It's very nice that you are joining us today. We are going to have a little bit of real talk about being and becoming an IBCLC. And so just a little bit of background about myself. I have been working in peer support for over 30 years and board certified for over 25 years. And I've worked in a hospital setting, I've worked in private practice, in community setting, policy work, advocacy, etc. How about you, Sekeita?
Yeah, I mirror some of your experience. I am been a nurse for about 25 years, a lactation consultant for 15 years, but have been doing lactation work for about 20 years. I too have worked in a hospital setting, also outside the hospital setting, and in private practice, also just a heap of other things. But I am excited that you've decided to join us today on this very important topic. I mean, I really take pride in being an IBCLC, and so I try to just always keep it real because there's lots of things going on in the land of lactation.
Indeed, there is. So we will give you a nice broad overview on how you too can join the ranks and be an IBCLC. But first, just a little bit of housekeeping. So if you are joining us today on the GoToWebinar platform, you will notice the area where you can ask us questions. So take a look with the blue arrow and it will show you where to find that question box. You can also find it if you're listening on a mobile device. You can find it there near the bottom. You see that question mark, the green arrow is pointing to the question mark. So you are more than welcome to type in any questions as well as any chat comments to the organizers. And you are welcome to type in, for example, where you're participating from today. We'd love to know where folks are listening in. So please do type in where you're listening today. So joining our webinar today, we have Wendy. Wendy is part of our amazing customer support team, and she can answer any questions that you may have about this whole process of becoming an IBCLC. She's been with LER for quite a number of years and is very well versed. Also, we have Jill. Jill is here to help with any tech issues. So if you type any questions in the chat, if you need any tech help, Jill can definitely help you out. If you have any general questions, Wendy will answer some of those questions while we talk, and she'll flag a couple of them so that we can answer them live, probably at the end of the webinar. Okay, so let's dive in and take a look at what it means to be a lactation consultant and how you can follow your passion and become one. If you decide to be an IBCLC, you will join more than 35,000 IBCLCs in over 131 countries and territories. Credentialing as a lactation consultant is offered by the International Board of Lactation Consultant Examiners. Take a look at their website. They have different regional offices depending on where in the world you live or reside. Review the requirements and the pathways to become eligible to take the IBLCE certification exam. So some people will ask, well, gee, what do I need to know? The detailed content outline, it used to be known as the exam blueprint, is based on surveys of IBCLCs in various practice settings around the world. The outline covers all of the topic areas and chronological stages that an IBCLC needs to know in their work. LER courses cover the entire detailed content outline, and our courses are approved by LARC. That is the Lactation Education Accreditation and Approval Review Committee. They evaluate our programs and approve lactation consultant training courses. Now, Sekeita is going to review a few questions for you to ask yourself today. Sekeita?
Yes, thanks, Angela. So before we take a deep dive into all of today's content, I want you to ask yourself while we're thinking and while you're hearing, I should say, and listening. And it might be helpful to write some of these questions down, but ask yourself, do I have the skills necessary? And, there's tons of skills we're going to go over. When I talk about skills, I'm not just talking about the hands-on approach, and I'm going to go through some of that in just a minute. But do I have the skills? And if you do, that's fine. But if you don't, ask yourself, where will I get these skills? So it's a good thing to kind of write these questions down, reflect after we're done, and think about strategically how you're going to achieve becoming an IBCLC. So, what makes an IBCLC? At the top of the list is competent. And competency means that you have the skill and the knowledge and the understanding, the evidence, and I'm going to say all of these things, and the ability to do a skill and to do it successfully. So you've mastered it. Now, there are varying levels. There's the entry level where we usually typically say novice, where someone who's just entering the field, no, you're not going to see everything and have done everything. However, you should be competent in the basic skills to support lactation and have enough knowledge to know where to find resources and how to figure out certain complicated cases. And so, having that foundational skill, but also building up on that. So when we think about from novice to expert, over the years after you become an IBCLC and you practice and practice and practice, you will be that expert. But really, competency means having those basic foundational skills to support clinical lactation management. Culturally appropriate, incredible care. Culturally appropriate, you will see this written as culturally competent, culturally relevant, you will see it written so many different ways. But I really want to unpack what this actually means and what it means to me as I think about the type of care that we deliver. So, when we think about the word that I said, competent, when you hear the word culturally competent, one might think, or you might think, can I be competent in someone else's culture, right? Because I remember I said you have the skills, the knowledge, and the ability, right? We all know that there's subcultures within cultures. And so I think for me, culturally appropriate is most fitting, and culturally appropriate is where you can also link care that is defined with cultural humility. And so cultural humility really starts with us. It's a lifelong process where we take an inner look at what our belief systems are, and we start to identify our own cultural identities. And so then we further have understanding. Once we understand our own, then we can really begin to understand others. And that's just one definition of cultural humility. There's really many definitions, and you can start with the National Institute of Health if you want to learn more about cultural humility. But really, you know, particularly when we think about lactation, I'll give you an example of what I mean. So some folks will say in context that their culture, they don't really breastfeed. Um, so it's really not really understanding that people are individuals and not just defined by their assumed culture. And so really, you don't really know unless a person has really said to you, yeah, in my household, in my culture, right? And so it's really getting at the heart of really just not putting blanket statements or even when you look at literature, basic generalizing certain topics to people. So credibility. Are you a credible source? And what I mean by that is when someone asks you a question, if you don't know the answer, how do you respond? Sometimes people respond with their own experience, and just know that's like one in a trillion, right? But Do you try to answer and just fudge it, even though you don't have an experience and you don't know? Or do you really sit and think and say, let me get back to you. Let me figure that piece out. And I'm asking you to kind of reevaluate, what credibility looks like and what it means. Because if you're giving out information that A, coincides with the best evidence, and B, you really know what you're talking about, that's how you become credible. When you lose credibility, the profession loses credibility. And I alluded to earlier about there's a lot of things going on in lactation land, and that's what I was saying. If you're anywhere on the internet, you will see some things and you're like, whoa, where did they get that information? So just keep in mind that the responsibility that you carry as an IBCLC is to make sure you are delivering credible and evidenced information. That's how we promote the profession, and that's how we really truly are set apart from some other professions. Policy advisor, creator, and advocate. As an IBCLC, you will, at some point, policy will become a core uh, element of the work that you do. And when I say that, I mean sometimes we actually really do help create policies, but sometimes we're just sitting at the table giving our input toward policies. Either way, it's very important to know that being at the table, understanding policies as they impact the profession, as well as how they impact families, is a huge part of what we do. In saying that, it also comes along with being an advocate. And simply, an advocate is really just your public support, your public I don't want to say outcry, but really just strong support of a cause, right? And so really advocating for quality care, access to care, access and timely access to skilled lactation care. So just know that IBCLCs are stakeholders. So we're at the table whenever there's lactation specific or related policies that are being discussed. So if policy is your strong suit, absolutely. If policy is not your strong suit, that's okay too. We are all stakeholders. Being a problem solver and a researcher, they're one and the same. However, one can be defined by academia. So being a problem solver is about 90% of what we do because each family have their own concerns. Each family, sometimes I say it's like a million piece puzzle, right? Oh, just imagine everybody being a puzzle and you have to put them together. That's kind of what we do when we're walking into families' spaces where they're lactating or have some concerns or some questions. So as lactation consultants, when you're called, you are usually called for a problem, right? So be mindful about framing lactation concerns from this one size fits all framework because we often know that one size never fits all. And so we really should be problem solving based on the individual's context, environment, support systems, concerns, family, all of the things that they're sharing with you. And along with being a problem solver, remember I said, you have to sometimes be like, I don't. Let me go look this up. Well, that's being a researcher. And there's two ways to be a researcher. You can be a researcher who actually carries out scientific and academic research, doing random control trials or even quality and quantitative. I know you're learning all of these topics, right? You can be that type of researcher. Remember, we're not all walking dictionaries. And so we do have to resort back to having valid and reliable tools that inform our High-level lactation care that is skilled. Both go hand in hand. When I mention high-level lactation care, I am really talking about care that sets the IBCLC apart from the uncomplicated cases of lactation care. So let me give you one example of what I mean about, complicated versus uncomplicated. So, example of basic breastfeeding care, which is assisting with latch and positioning when the infant and parent is well, there's been no other issues identified. I just need a little bit of assistance versus someone who may be in an ICU bed who was lactating prior to or wishes to lactate, who's actually intubated on life support. Are you able to deliver the type of care that is necessary for this client? Are you able to look at the medications? Are you able to say, oh, this patient, do they have a brain injury? How might this brain injury impact lactation? In essence, what I'm saying is, are you able to make all the connections that are necessary in a high level case? So when you're doing your training, sometimes you're like, oh, why do I need to know about this? Why do I need to know about the brain? You need to know about the brain because that is the level of care that sets the IBCLC apart. Being able to handle complex clinical cases with sound clinical decision making and recommendations that are appropriate for these types of cases. So, when I asked earlier, do you have the skills necessary? I'm going to tell you right off, I just gave you a really, really, really high level case. That is not your average case, so don't get scared. Stay with me here, all right? The expectation is that you don't go into every single clinical decision saying, I've seen it all, I know this. However, once you build your skills and you build your skills and you build your skills, you will say, wow, I have a huge knowledge set. Now let me figure out how to figure this particular case out. That will help to develop you into expert mode. So one of the things we found out during the pandemic, we heard the word essential so many times, and it became a buzzword. And we found out that yes, lactation consultants are essential. Why? Because people were still having babies. And especially during a pandemic, promoting and protecting the ability to provide human milk is critically important, not just from like the bonding standpoint, but from a public health and prevention standpoint. So, yes, we are essential. And it's important that we show up when families need us. And it's important that we're timely when folks need us. So, you will hear people say post pandemic. I will still say that we're in a pandemic. Um, so we can't say like, okay, we're in a pandemic now, you're on your own. No, we are frontline workers. And it is so serious that we understand what that means. And so I just want to make it real clear that, we talk about telehealth, we talk about all these other different modes of delivering care, but telehealth is good. Telehealth is great, but sometimes we need to be in person, and telehealth prohibits the ability to use our other senses. So I can recall being called to a case during the pandemic and this was at the start, when the baby hadn't been seen by a pediatrician. And the mother was calling and calling and calling, and she was getting telehealth, and it just wasn't working for her. And I'm just thankful that we crossed paths, because what I was able to figure out by actually going to the home was that no, baby was not effectively feeding at the breast, and nor was baby effectively feeding from the bottle. And so just imagine if I would not have been timely and showed up and was able to advocate and call the pediatrician and say, hey, there's some tone issues going on. Like, I'm concerned about this baby, right? So we have to be timely because that can make or break someone's breastfeeding journey and also the health of a child and that well-being of the parent. I can tell you right now, I love being a collaborative care partner. When I walk into situations, that's what I do, and that's who I am. I love this phrase because it assumes that I'm collaborating with the client or the patient. It assumes that I am not the center, I am not the expert. I may have expert knowledge, but I am not the decision maker nor the expert. The families are. So remember, it's the families and their partners. It's their goals, it's their fears, it's the barriers that takes precedence over your goals for them. So what am I saying? I'm saying that yes, we all know the recommendations of exclusive breast milk feeding or human milk feeding for at least 6 months. We know those things. And it's important that we still talk about them and amplify them as it relates to health. However, we also have to understand that we are collaborating in partnership and agreement when someone seeks our care. And we have to make sure that we approach each situation in a manner that does not overstep some boundaries that are not meant to be overstepped. So that's how you become trusted. You become trusted to do no harm, to be reliable, trusted to say, I see you as a person. I see we're in this together. I'm not higher than you. There is no hierarchy. We're collaborating to do what is best for you. The one thing, the way to lose trust is to go into a clinical situation and assume that because you are the expert, you know all about it. You've been teaching it for 15, 20 years, and you just don't go in and say, okay, this is how it should work. And then you go and you touch and you do all these things without asking permission. You want to let them tell you what type of assistance they were looking for before you go in and just exert a position of power. So that's how you become a collaborative care partner and trusted. So person-centered care, I try not to let this be a buzzword in my clinical interactions. I hope you don't allow it to become a buzzword in yours. You will see that many of the things that I've talked about, culture, care, collaboration, and communication, and how we show up in our communication, you will see that the person is the center. And essentially, what this means is that we're just providing care that is respectful and responsive to the person's preferences, needs, and values, and ensuring that their values guide all clinical decisions. So I've talked about all of these things. If you want to know more about person-centered care, you can visit the Institute of Medicine, and there's a definition, and there's also a breakdown on how truly you can deliver this type of care without it just being a buzzword. Right. So I began with questions. I'm going to end with questions. Some of the questions that you also want to ask as Angela gets ready to prepare to talk about the different pathways. You want to know what the local market looks like around you. And when I say that, what I mean is are there other IBCLCs in your area? Is the area saturated with IBCLCs? Probably not. But what is the market? Are most people working in hospitals, or are they doing private practice, or are they working for pediatricians, or are they working for obstetricians? You want to know what does the market look like? Also, you want to know when you're on the pathway, how does the pathway fit into my life? There's lots of things that's happening in life. And also, we have to have clinical hours, we have to have college study, so many requirements we have to meet. You want to take a moment to analyze, where does this fit? How can I make it fit? Is it the appropriate time right now to make this fit? Or when should I try to fit this in? And you also want to look at mentorship around your area. And when I say mentorship, I don't mean like sometimes there's paid mentorships, but what I'm meaning is just that extra ear, that IBCLC to kind of just guide you a little bit in a way that is meaningful to your growth in this area. So I think I've given you what I feel to be seriously some of the real key foundational things that makes an awesome IBCLC. Angela's going to move forward, and I don't know why she disappeared. She's going to move forward and talk about the pathways. Best wishes to you.
Thanks, Sekeita. Okay, so the process of becoming an IBCLC can feel a little bit complicated, but I'm going to break it down and give you a roadmap to sit the exam. So the first thing you need to do is choose a pathway. We're going to come back to this in just a moment. Now, each pathway has three components. The first one is the education. The second are the clinical hours. And the third is exam prep, getting ready for that test. So the first component is health science education. It's a typical education for healthcare providers. There are 8 post-secondary or university level courses and 6 general education courses. You can find a full list of each of these 14 subjects on the IBLCE website. Now, the 8 university level courses are, and now you don't need to write these down, but they are biology, anatomy, physiology, infant and child growth and development, introduction to clinical research, nutrition, psychology or counseling skills or communication skills, and finally, sociology or cultural sensitivity or cultural anthropology. Now, they can be online or in person, as long as the institution is accredited to provide that learning. Now, if you took any of these courses at any time during your lifetime, during your college career, they count, even if it was 20 years ago. Now, LER partners with Walden University provide those basic courses. It is an online university. The advantage of working with Walden is that if you decide that you want to get your bachelor's degree, then you can also apply for financial aid. So that way you can have a few more possibilities in order to fund that education. Now, the 6 general education subjects are medical documentation, medical terminology, occupational safety and security for health professionals, professional ethics for health professionals, universal safety precautions, and infection control and basic life support. So 5 of the 6 general ed courses, you can get them through Lactation Education Resources. That's us. The only one you're going to need to search for is basic life support. In many countries, there is an in-person skills check for this training. Now, I have heard of some organizations providing this training completely online, so it's important to check with your local resources. The guide on the IBLCE website, which talks about the descriptions for what these different courses are supposed to be, is quite vague. So IBLCE in their description, it's very general, it's vague, and the reason why is because IBLCE is an international organization. So the names used in their document to describe the courses may not exactly fit the description of the course at your accredited educational institution. That's okay. IBLCE, they use these broad terms with an understanding that there is no one universal description for what a course in, say, clinical research will cover. So now, why are these 14 courses even required? It's because the IBCLC is a standalone credential, meaning you don't need to get another certification, degree, or license to practice as an IBCLC. Once you pass the exam, you will be an allied healthcare professional. These courses help you be prepared for your career, as well as to help you pass the IBLCE exam. Now, the second thing that you're going to need is lactation-specific education, and this is where LER has you covered. The education should be comprehensive and cover the IBLCE detailed content outline. IBLCE requires at least 90 hours of lactation-specific education, 5 hours on communication skills. Now, our 5-hour course is specific to lactation and breastfeeding care to help you in your practice as a lactation consultant. The third component is lactation-specific clinical experience. LER has you covered here as well. Now, this can include in-person consultations, telephone consultations, or online breastfeeding and lactation care that supports breastfeeding families. It also includes lactation assistance to pregnant and breastfeeding clients and lactation education to families and/or professionals. These hours can be obtained in the 5 years immediately preceding applying for the exam. So now, how many clinical hours do you need? Well, that depends upon your pathway. So here's a quick overview of the 3 different pathways. Now, pathway 1 is for healthcare professionals and those who provide breastfeeding support through an IBLCE recognized breastfeeding support counselor organization. Healthcare professionals, according to IBLCE, are physicians, nurses, midwives, dietitians, physical therapists, speech pathologists, and others. Breastfeeding support counselors include those accredited through organizations such as LER, La Leche League International, and the Australian Breastfeeding Association. As of today, there are over 40 organizations that have applied to IBCLC and have been approved. Pathway 2 applicants must complete a comprehensive academic program in human lactation and breastfeeding through an accredited university program. The education has both the didactic and the clinical components that they need, and they require 300 clinically supervised hours working with breastfeeding families. Now, Pathway 3 is a structured mentorship program between an IBCLC or IBCLCs and the applicant. The IBCLC must be in good standing with IBLCE. Those who choose this pathway must have their program approved prior to beginning to accrue their clinical hours. And I understand that that's happening relatively quickly now, like within a few weeks. Now, for those of you who have breastfed or chest-fed or provided human milk for your child, the hours that you spent nursing or pumping and helping your friends, they don't count towards your clinical hours. Now, while 500 or 1,000 hours seems like a lot, there's a really good reason why. Each candidate needs to have the clinical experience they need so they can provide competent care, as Sekeita talked about, as an IBCLC. If it's any consolation, the number used to be a lot more. I've known IBCLCs who needed anywhere from 2,500 to 8,000 clinical hours just to take the test. So candidates who are applying for the IBLCE exam through Pathway 1 need at least 1,000 hours. For the candidate who's also a healthcare provider, the hours can be done in a hospital, birth center, clinic, lactation care clinic or practice, or through independent practice as a licensed or registered healthcare professional in a non-healthcare setting. For breastfeeding support counselors from an IBLCE recognized organization like LER, these hours can be earned in person or online. The location and type of support depends on the criteria provided by the recognized organization. The hours need to be counted on an hour-by-hour basis. So now, 2 important things about those clinical hours through Pathway 1. You need to document your hours as you accrue them. And the reason you do that is in case IBLCE chooses to audit your application to sit the exam. So they're going to want some sort of documentation. And the second point here is that these 1,000 hours through Pathway 1 do not need to be supervised. Now, Pathway 3 requires 500 hours of clinical experience. It's best done in a busy practice setting where you can work with many breastfeeding, chest-feeding people and those providing human milk for their babies each day, such as a hospital or clinic setting. Now, the hours count towards the 500 hours only when you're actually working with families. Observation hours don't count. Now, the clinical experience is graduated. So first, it's going to start with just some observation and then doing tasks under supervision and then completing tasks independently with the IBCLC close by to ask questions and discuss any situations. Now, LER does have an internship program with many sites around the United States. You can reach out to support@lactationtraining.com, and we can connect you with our clinical internship director, Amy Black, to determine if we have a site in your area. If not, we can give you a few suggestions on how you can work with your local hospital or clinic to facilitate an internship site. Now, one thing Amy wanted me to mention in this webinar is that you can't start to count your hours towards the internship requirement until both you and the IBCLC are comfortable with you working independently. Most interns will spend about 75 hours in orientation before you can begin to accrue the 500 hours. Or you can take a look in your community to see if you can find a willing internship site or mentors. You may need to reach out to many people to find someone with the time, experience, and capacity to agree to be your mentor. And it's really important to find a good fit. Talk with others who've been through Pathway 3 to find successful strategies with finding a good mentor. Now, this pathway does have a few steps in advance, and some will ask if it's worth it. Well, we say that it is. And the reason why is that IBCLC does publish the scores, at least they have in the past. They've published the scores according to which pathway each student took. And it seems that those who are in Pathway 3 usually score better on the exam. And we think the reason why has to do with that mentorship, the experience of someone really talking you through each one of those situations in order to help you to understand the why. And then you can take that information and apply it on the exam. Now, a lot of people are asking whether or not they can accrue clinical hours via telehealth during the pandemic. And the quick answer is yes. And the longer answer is paraphrased from a couple of IBCLC documents from 17 April and 6 October 2020. It will see will allow the use of certain technology if certain parameters are met. And you're going to need to pay attention to privacy rules and the Code of Professional Conduct in your area and the Code of Competencies for IBCLCs. And another important point from IBCLC is that observation using technology with two-way synchronous audio and visual components, the focus needs to be on the mentor providing the mentorship and guiding the applicant. Now, the guidance has been extended until 30 September of 2023. So do take a look at the IBCLC website to see if that has been extended. At LER, there are two ways to gather your lactation-specific education. One is LCTP, which is the full 95 hours front to back. The other is core or bridge. They are designed to meet your education needs depending on your background and previous training. Now first, the comprehensive course called the Lactation Consultant Training Program is 90+ hours, which is eligible for CERPS, CME, and nursing contact hours. It's intended for those who do not have any lactation education and they know they want to become an IBCLC. We have more than 35 of the most knowledgeable, experienced instructors who are practicing lactation consultants, researchers, and authors who teach in our courses, including me and Sekeita. Our classes are economical. You can view them on a variety of devices such as your computer, tablet, or phone, and they are optimized for a computer, but they can be reviewed later when you're on the go. And we've been educating people in person and online since 1990. We update our course information on a very regular basis with the latest peer-reviewed evidence. And we will update them every 3 years, but sometimes we will update them more quickly or sooner if the research changes. Have a question for the instructor? You can send an email to our support forum, and we have IBCLCs available to answer your questions. Want to discuss the concept with your fellow students? We're discussing innovative ways for people to connect. Stay tuned for more information. Upon completion of the 95-hour course, you're eligible to take the Certified Breastfeeding Specialist exam. The exam is included in the price. Once you pass, you are a Certified Breastfeeding Specialist. This is to recognize you for the level of education you have attained. With this certification, you can begin to collect your clinical hours towards the IBCLC exam. Now, if you're not sure where to start, or you already have some lactation-specific education hours, then we have our core or bridge programs to meet your needs. They have the same advantage as the LCTP course. Our initial course is called Core because it will provide you with the core lactation education you need to understand what it means to begin to support the normal course of breastfeeding. It's 52 plus hours of online education. It covers the basics like anatomy and physiology, infant growth and development, supporting the preterm baby, medications and breastfeeding, and many more. At the end of the course is a certified breastfeeding specialist exam. The bridge course is ideal for people who have the basic lactation education components and they just need that additional 45 hours to qualify for the exam. Topics in our bridge course include legal and ethical concerns for the lactation consultant, infant feeding and disasters, breastfeeding the infant with medical challenges, case studies, and clinical skills videos. If you're not sure where to start, well, if you're new to the profession, I would suggest the core course. Get your feet wet and see if becoming an IBCLC fits. Now, our 90-hour course, as well as the core or bridge courses, are available in Spanish. Capacitación en Lactancia is our new website, which provides the same high-quality education found on LER in Spanish. Now, at LER, we believe that access to high-quality lactation education should not be limited to those who live in countries with high incomes. We recognize that in many parts of the world, the relative purchasing power of a local currency may make the cost of lactation education inaccessible. As part of our commitment to increasing access to lactation training worldwide, our pricing is adjusted according to the student's country of residence. In alignment with our commitment to diversity, we are proud to announce our Rising Tide Lactation Equity Scholarship, as well as Juntos Triunfamos. We recognize that one of the greatest obstacles to entry into the field is access, specifically demonstrated by financial barriers. LER will remove that barrier for scholarship awardees. This year, our scholarship is going to be the Juntos Triunfamos. Keep an eye on our social media. We'll be announcing the open application process very soon. Our team is here to help you now and in the future. We have tech support here and available 7 days a week. You can get your questions answered by experts in the field, and we can provide you that ongoing support for the next steps in your lactation career. So thank you very much for listening to us today. We really do appreciate it. Now, Sekeita's going to come back and answer any questions that may be in the chat. Sekeita, what do you see today?
I see that Wendy has done a fabulous job in answering all of the questions, including one that was recently flagged. But I do see another one that just came through, and it's, how would you recommend checking to see if the local market is saturated? Well, I recommend being connected. If you have a local breastfeeding coalition, or if there is the La Leche League, you will have to somewhat network a little bit to figure out what's going on around your area. You could also sometimes get information from just social media around your area, knowing if parents are calling for access and unable to get access because maybe the one IBCLC in the county or the city is booked. So really and truly, it's being connected and really getting fillers out. It is not a one thing just to do. You really have to really do some homework, take a deep dive, start to network, and you'll know a little bit more about your area. I hope that answers your question. Angela, you have anything to add?
I do. Our hours program, our Pathway 1 program, is now available for anyone who is a certified breastfeeding specialist. And it's a way for people to earn their clinical hours. And we're really excited about it. And I actually was chatting with someone. We piloted this program. We've been piloting it for over a year now. And I spoke to someone in our pilot program yesterday. And to your point of knowing what's in the market, they've been doing all sorts of networking with folks. sometimes they can find some people and they thought they had an opportunity in order to provide skilled lactation care as a CBS. And unfortunately, it sort of fell through. And so they were, wondering, what can I do now? And so we just had a really nice conversation about it. Another person in our hours program, and hours stands for, and pardon me if I don't quite catch this, but it's because it's a new acronym that we've developed. It's the hands-on understanding and resources for success hours. And so we actually have several IBCLCs on staff, or La Leche League leaders, or certified breastfeeding specialists on staff. And so one of our CBSs reached out to me and they said, hey, I've got this client and I really had a few questions and, I'd love to chat with you. And so indeed, we had a conversation about it and what are some of the things that they can do and what are some of the ways that they can offer that support. And it was a really wonderful learning experience for both of us. So that, I was able to, they asked me a question, which I wanted to double check in the resources. And so I did. And so it was really, a wonderful way to connect, and I could offer some experience and also, some of those parameters by which they can offer that support. So it was really a phenomenal call. So indeed, we do have folks here who can support people on their journey to collect 1,000 hours towards sitting the IBLCE exam.
All right, Angela, there's another question that's popped up. It says, I'm an RDN working in WIC, so I do have basic breastfeeding counseling, but it's often part of a broader appointment. Can I count those hours? And if so, how do I keep track of them? If I'm with a family for an hour and I don't spend the whole time talking about breastfeeding, but it feels awkward to look at my clock, and we may leave the topic and then return to breastfeeding later as things come up. So that's a really great question on how to really count your hours. And I would say just be mindful. You don't have to like clock watch, but be mindful and then think about what percentage of maybe the hour that you spent or maybe the 45 minutes that you spent, what percentage did you really talk about breastfeeding counseling? And that is what you count. And I believe on the IBLCE, on their website, you can find track a document to track your hours and record your hours, but really just thinking about it like that, determining, and being as honest as you can. The reality is that if we're not honest in our clinical hours, then our clinical skills will show, or lack thereof.
This is very true. And indeed, IBCLC does have that calculator on their website. For those people, for example, who are healthcare professionals and provide that care as part of their regular job, working in maternal child health, it's really simple. It's just a percentage. What percentage of time do you spend supporting, lactating people, breastfeeding families, things like this? And so it's relatively general. The only time you're going to need to sort of show that documentation is if your application is flagged, and if they do audit you. So if they audit you, then yes, you are going to have to provide that information. So, okay, but you don't need to provide. Let me just be careful to say you don't need to provide, like names of your clients or anything like that. You just need to provide that, on this and such date, on 30 September, you ran a support group for an hour and a half, and a breastfeeding support group for an hour and a half. And so that would be what you would count, is that hour and a half of time.
Thanks for clarifying that, Angela. There's another question, or a request, I should say. Can either of the facilitators just offer some encouraging words for working mothers who have families that have a passion to do this work, but may be feeling hesitant to pursue? You want to go first, or I'll go first, whichever.
Well, I mean, indeed, we all have had families, or I shouldn't say all. Many of us do have families when we're trying to do the work, or we may have families and we have jobs and we have to find a way to support the work. And so that's what Sekeita was really talking about in the beginning is, how much time do you have to dedicate to, lactation care? And it's really helpful if you can just be, honest with yourself. Some people say, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to spend, 10 hours a week doing this. And then when you actually take a look at your life and your schedule, you think, where am I going to do that, right? In other words, some people can offer lactation support at 2 o'clock in the morning on a help forum online, but how consistent is that work? And how sustainable is that for you providing that care? So indeed, really taking a look at it and then, figuring out the hours and being able to juggle into balance. I mean, I have been known to go to the hospital and do some lactation work, some clinical care, and frankly leave and go watch one of my kids' sports games, and then when I'm done, go back to the hospital and do a few more hours. So if that's something, if you've got that supportive partner, if you have those supportive family members, then that is a way that can be doable. Someone, for example, taking the 95-hour CBS course who had 3 young children would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and do 2 hours. That was their dedicated time. They would do 2 hours of work on the 95 hours, and then they were able to deal with their family and deal with the rest of their day. So it's a matter of scheduling it and planning it out. Anything else as well,
Yeah,
Sekeita?
I do want to add, I want to say that if this is your passion, go for it. That's the first thing I want to say. I want to say that
Yes,
it's
so
not,
true.
yeah, it's not an all or nothing. If and this question is this request is really contextual, because what it makes me wonder is like, what pathway are you referring? So let's just say it's a pathway where you need to get the college courses. Do one college course at a time. If this is your passion, each day is going to go by regardless to whether you pursue your passion or not. So take a baby step, even if that means just writing it down as a plan of how you're going to figure it out. You've already started, right? And so do it. We need passionate people in the field, because passionate people typically will deliver quality care that is based on evidence and not on Dr. Google. Okay? That's based on sound clinical management. And I love passionate people in this work. So I'm just saying, whatever piece you can do tomorrow, do that tomorrow, even if that's just reflection of today. Whatever piece you can do next week or next year, just do it. And I don't mean to sound like, the brand over there, but I'm saying if it's your passion, go for it. So I hope that gives you some insight. Again, remember, there is not a race. Like, you run your own race. This is your journey to become an IBCLC. And whatever supports you need, identify those, seek those supports, but just keep pursuing until it
Inspiring.
until it no longer becomes a passion. Until a passion, sometimes passion is fleeting, but in this work, I'm still passionate about this. So, you know.
Agreed. No, that's inspiring. Thanks, Sekeita. Great way to answer the question. Okay, so someone is working as an infant feeding specialist in the UK. Does the hour-for-hour rules requirement also cover the handoff, providing that you give to community midwives, which in the UK, the community midwives actually support and follow up with the family for the first 28 days of life. And so indeed, the time that you spend in that handoff, in that warm handoff, while amazing, it's actually direct lactation and breastfeeding care that you're providing. And so indeed, that would not be covered on the hour by hour. And I know that, it's not like a 2-minute job, that it's something where, when you're giving that really good handoff, it's something that does take a bit of time. And the hours that you accrue, though, are actually providing that care to families, directly to families, or teaching or supporting.
There's another one, Angela. Do either of you have any thoughts on IBCLCs who haven't personally done breastfeeding? I don't have any children myself, so I'm nervous clients won't trust me. So I don't have any thoughts one way or the other about that, as long as you're transparent with your clients, as long as you don't make it seem as though you have this experience. No, I don't. I will say, though, as a nurse working in maternal child health, I was teaching this before I had my first child. And then when I first had engorgement, you would have thought I did not know what that word meant. Um, so there's some element of it, but I feel like anyone who personally wants to do this work and is passionate about this work should do this work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Well,
about you, Angela.
I agree. I mean, we know some men who are in this profession. So that's the thing, is that you don't need to have birthed a baby in order to, and or lactated in order to provide, high quality, competent care. So indeed, do follow that passion, and know that, the education and the training that you receive is something which is, just top notch. Also keep in mind, one of the challenges about breastfeeding is that it is so personal. And we don't want folks giving what worked for them as the way that everybody should do things. And that's actually, giving that piece of information out, or giving that, that sort of like brinks on advice. Oh, I did it this way, therefore you should do it this way, the same way, is not necessarily that evidence-based or competent care. So
Yeah, I'm loving these questions actually. The
I
next
am
one is,
too.
yeah, is it realistic to expect to earn clinical hours while earning education hours? Or must I wait until completion of the education to move forward with accruing clinical hours? I'll say this, mm, there's something to having that background that's going to help you in your clinical situations. So if you are,
I think we lost you, Sekeita.
it muted me. My computer muted by itself. That's very interesting.
That's
Unless
ridiculous.
unless the tech
Okay.
team or Angela, unless you are trying to prank me. Oh,
Jill is on the call, so there's
all
my
right.
hands. Go ahead,
I
try
don't even
start
know what
again.
I was saying. I mean, I know what I was saying. I was saying that having that didactic and that foundational knowledge before entering clinical skills will give you the best use of your clinical time and learning. So, not having the foundation and just going into these situations, there's nothing for you to really feed off of, right? And so, you don't have to do it, but I think it's extremely important that you have the background knowledge before going into these clinical situations with families.
Right, because you don't want to make stuff up, right? You may have heard, oh, if you eat these cookies, it'll increase your milk supply.
Drink blue
So,
Gatorade.
blue Gatorade, that's right. I forgot it was blue. Yes. So, yes, there's no need to do that. Okay. Follow-up question here. Our hospital is a UNICEF BFAI hospital. That's great. Level 3 accreditation. I have to give regular breastfeeding training to the midwives. Does that not count towards 1,000 hours either? Sadly, no. The breastfeeding training that you give to your colleagues does not count. So, indeed, that is a bit of a shame. But of course, if you're able to teach it, then chances are you know it. And it is frustrating that you can't count those hours. So, when you become an IBCLC, the teaching that you do actually does count towards the CERPs, or the continuing education that you need as a lactation consultant. So once you're board certified, then you can count some of those hours. So, and for this person, I believe is a baby friendly hospital accredited. Sounds like you're in the UK. So
Yeah.
I hope to see you in the UK in November.
Would be great
So great.
if you met up with someone who was on this call and they came up to you and said, "Hey."
Definitely. If I'm in the UK, then maybe I'll buy you some fish and chips or something. Well, that would be great.
Mhm.
Good.
Okay,
Okay. I think we got all the questions today. Yeah,
I think
Sekeita?
so. I think so. I love the questions. Thank you all for joining us, whatever time it is, time of day for you. But for me, it's the afternoon. I did enjoy really talking about what's real because it's so important to me that families have the information, the correct information, timely, skilled, access to clinical sound lactation support and care. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day or evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.